President Trump says he's ordered the deployment of 2 U.S. nuclear submarines to the appropriate regions in response to threats from the former Russian President Dmitri Medvedev. Both men have been taunting each other of late after the White House this week said Russia had 10 days to agree to a ceasefire in Ukraine or face tough sanctions. In response, Mr. Medvedev reminded him that Russia possessed nuclear strike capabilities. It's not clear exactly where Mr. Trump has ordered the submarines to be deployed. We'll have reaction from Moscow in a moment with Steve Rosenberg. But first, Gary O'Donoghue has our top story from Washington.
In recent days, Donald Trump's rhetoric on Russia has turned up a notch.
Russia? I think it's disgusting what they're doing.
But rhetoric has now turned to action with the deployment of 2 nuclear submarines, not specifying whether they were the kind that could carry nuclear warheads. He was responding to the words of the former Russian President Dmitri Medvedev, who accused the US president of playing the ultimatum game over threats to impose fresh sanctions on Russia next week if a ceasefire in Ukraine wasn't agreed. The former president said, "Each new ultimatum is a threat and a step towards war, not between Russia and Ukraine, but with his own country." In a post on Truth Social, Donald Trump said he was deploying the subs just in case these foolish and inflammatory statements are more than just that. Words are very important and can often lead to unintended consequences. I hope this will not be one of those instances. The 2 men have met before in 2017 at a summit in Asia. President Medvedev called Donald Trump open and well-meaning. While former President Medvedev retains a role in Russia's National Security Council, he is not seen as the voice of Vladimir Putin, but nonetheless is provocative in his statements. Today, the current Russian president, pictured here with his Belarusian counterpart, was more measured, declaring that disappointments only came from excessive expectations. The US has more than a dozen submarines that can carry nuclear warheads. They form part of the so-called triad of air, land and sea deterrence, the most undetectable part of America's strategic nuclear force. Donald Trump's latest deadline on Russia runs out at the end of next week. He's already said he doesn't expect fresh sanctions to change Vladimir Putin's behavior.
Well, in a moment, we'll hear from Steve in Moscow. But first, back to you, Gary, in Washington. This all seems, frankly, extraordinary. The deployment of nuclear submarines?
It is extraordinary, Clive. I mean, it's not clear whether these are nuclear-armed submarines or nuclear-powered submarines. It's worth saying that. And we don't know where they're being put. And yesterday, the Secretary of State, also the National Security Advisor, really downplayed these kinds of comments from President Medvedev, saying he wasn't a relevant player, he wasn't a decision maker in Russia. And today here we have the President sending off a couple of submarines in the direction because of these comments from the former President Medvedev. So it's unclear exactly how serious this is. We're always told that we should take his actions, not his words, seriously, and these are actions. And in the past few minutes, the President has said that a threat was made, it wasn't appropriate, and that he had to protect our people, as he put it. Well, this is a significant escalation, but we'll see really whether it amounts to more than words. And there will be this crunch point at the end of next week when this deadline runs out in terms of Ukraine, and extra sanctions could be put on Russia and its trading partners like India and China.
Yeah, that deadline now taking on added significance. To you, Steve, in Moscow, Mr. Medvedev, former Russian president and prime minister, now deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council, he's been an outspoken critic of the West since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, hasn't he?
Yes, he certainly has. Interestingly, there's been no reaction so far from the Kremlin, from the Foreign Ministry, from the Defense Ministry, anyone here really. I think everyone's trying to work out what on earth is going on and what, if anything, has changed in relation to where these US nuclear subs are being positioned. There has been reaction from the Moscow stock market, which has fallen sharply. Judging by the reaction in the local media here, Russians are surprised, to say the least, by President Trump's post. And I suspect that no one is more surprised than Dmitri Medvedev himself, because for more than 3 years he has been tweeting and posting some very bombastic and provocative social media posts, most of which have gone unnoticed, I have to say. But now suddenly he has been noticed and he's got under the skin of the President of the United States in a big way. Meanwhile, while all of this is going on, we think, Donald Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, to arrive in Russia, possibly to meet Vladimir Putin. And tonight, one prominent Russian news site described, he likened Mr. Witkoff to a rabbit being pulled out of a magician's hat, the magician being Donald Trump. But I think it's a big ask for Mr. Witkoff to magically ease all the tensions that we're seeing at the moment.
Indeed. All right, Steve, thank you for that. Steve Rosenberg live in Moscow and Gary O'Donoghue in Washington. Many thanks.